more about building than probably all of us together. And I'm imagining every one of us knows how much it hurts when you hit your thumb with the hammer, right? So we all know a little bit, but the man who knows a lot, very good friend of mine. We're going to get down home with Tom Landis.
Folks, Mr. Jim Hinde, Emmy Award-winning storyteller, singer, songwriter. If you like him, any Saturday or Sunday, Pike Street Murphy, you see him out in front of Starbucks. Really great guy. Folk singer with a conscience.
Is there any other kind? You know, I was playing out in front of Starbucks a number of years ago, and that's where I met this gentleman right here. He comes up, he says, "You sound like a real folkie." And I said, "Well, I am a real folkie." And I said, "It must be a real folkie to know what a real folkie sounds like." And he says, "Would you come out and play my daughter's first birthday party?" So I did. She's 16 years old now. So we've been together for a long time. Tom wrote the book on building houses. And while I can drive a nail, Tom can actually put it all together. So I'm just going to sit back here in the background and pick on this guitar while Tom tells you how to do it.
Is he great? Huh? Pretty much a natural, wouldn't you say? Well, I'm an Iowa farm boy. I grew up in a little town called Winterset, Iowa. And I think if I told you that Winterset, Iowa was in Madison County, you'd all remember that the bridges of Madison County are pretty popular, pretty famous. They're made of wood. My cousin Mike, he's still back there, and he's the guy that goes around and repairs all the wooden bridges in Madison County. But I grew up in Winterset. And the man who taught me the trade was my Grandpa Herbert. Grandpa Herbert, he was a type of carpenter that worked the farm and repaired his own equipment and also built houses. And every winter, Grandpa Herbert and I, we'd work in the barn and we'd build the cabinets and the doors and the windows, shape all the millwork, do all the original craftsmanship for the house that we're going to build the following summer. It was a great experience for me as a boy. Well, that summer we'd be on the job site, we'd be out the deck, putting up the walls, staging the area, and we could hear Grandma Mabel coming down the road in her old Chevy. And you know how it is in Iowa, those old gravel roads, with someone coming down the road in an old Chevy, they can hear him coming a mile away. And Grandpa Herbert would say to me, he'd say, "Tommy, quick, grab your lunch pail. Here comes the dragon lady." And we'd run out in the cornfield with our lunch pails. We'd sit out there, we'd hunker down, and he'd teach me how to roll cigarettes and drink black coffee and play gin rummy. I swear. Grandpa Herbert taught me a lot of really cool things, both about life and about home building. So we put the houses together using all these components. But as I walked around the show today, what I found out was that you can get that old world craftsmanship out of the American marketplace. You don't have to build in a barn anymore to get the kind of craftsmanship that you deserve. Now, let me give you a for instance. Grandpa Herbert and I, we used to stick frame all the houses. Well, you know what that means. You get a pile of 2x4s, 2x6s, you cut everything individually. You gotta stand the walls, you do one wall at a time. It takes me 6 or 8 weeks to frame a house. By today's standard, I suggest that you use panelized walls. You all know what panelized walls are? It's where in the factory they're putting together a whole wall section using the very same 2x4s and 2x6s and plywood that you normally find on the job site. except it's done in a controlled atmosphere. There's no water damage, there's very little waste, and the cycle time is 2 or 3 or 4 days to build a whole house rather than 6 to 8 weeks. So one of the vendors I saw on the floor today was Armstrong Homes. John Armstrong is down in the booth right now. John is the owner of Armstrong Building Components, and what he's using is a panelized house building method. It's still under the International Residential Code, the IRC. It's signed off by the inspector, but you're reducing cycle time. You're spending less money, and you're getting a better quality product. When you look at those walls and they're up, and they're in place, you can't tell the difference between a stick frame building and a panelized building. So, even though Grandpa Herbert taught me all about one-of-a-kind custom construction, you can get the same results by using the modern methods. The same thing is true with cabinets and doors. When I get cabinets delivered to my job site, when I install a door, it comes pre-hung. The cabinets come pre-assembled. I'm gluing and screwing to the wall. I get a much better end result by using modern methods, and I still get the craftsmanship. So, what I learned from Grandpa was old world craftsmanship, but use the modern methods. Even though I've never met any of you before, I can tell you what you all want. You want a good value for the dollar spent. But here's the problem. What I see a lot of homeowners doing is that they're spending $1 to save a dime. What you want to do to get that good value for the dollar spent is to spend the dime to save $1. Let me tell you about an experience I had on a remodel job. We were doing a house for Louis and Linda Michele. They had a daughter, Lisa. When Lisa was getting a little bit older and she needed a spare room, at the same time, Linda and Louis, they also wanted to upgrade the kitchen and the dining room. So, when I first met with them, they took a look at the budget and they said, man, this is going to cost me way too much money. I said, yeah, you're probably right. They said, how can we save a few bucks? Well, after our conversation went on a ways, they said, what if we do all the demolition work? What if we handle all the debris? And I said, fine. Now, the first day I rolled to the job site, we're sitting there having a cup of coffee, and out the front door, what I see is all this debris flying out into the yard. I mean, there was cabinets and insulation and drywall and 2x4s. The crew and I sat there and we said, hey, these are the flying Micheles. Linda, Louis, and Lisa. And we knew right away that the mistake they were making is that they were spending $1 to save a dime. You know what happens in the Pacific Northwest when you have a pile of debris in your front yard? It rains. When all that stuff finally goes into a big dumpster, it weighs 1.5 tons instead of just 0.5 ton. So, when you're doing your project, I want you to remember the 3 R's of the Building Green philosophy. The 3 R's are reduce waste, recycle material, and reuse what you can. If Linda and Louis and Lisa, instead of having everything fly out the front door into their front yard and just become one big debris pile, all this stuff just kind of commingled, if they'd just taken the time to give stuff away to friends and family, to recycle the drywall and the concrete, reduce waste by maybe using those cabinets out in their garage or maybe in the basement, they would have come out money ahead. But they're worrying about doing it the quick way, the easy way, and not the smart way. Now, I saw today a company, a public agency actually, on the floor, TooGoodToToss.com. They have a great website. Michelle Miller's down there right now. Talk to Michelle. TooGoodToToss.com. And when you're doing your house, don't feel like the Flying Michelle is. What I want you to do is remember the 3 R's. Reduce, reuse, and recycle.
Gonna take this hammer, saw, and ladder and nail down the things that really matter, like a hope and dreams, joy and laughter to make way for little feet fitter, fatter, with a little love. 30 years of mortgage payments, blueprint studs, under layman to build this house into a home, like one on the range, home like by the holidays, home like where the sun shines bright, home like where the heart abides.
Now, I didn't spend my whole career just simply building houses and remodeling houses. After I'd done my time with Grandpa on the farm and went through an apprenticeship program, what I did later on is I joined the Navy Seabees. And if you don't know it, Navy Seabees are construction battalions, a C and a B. They're construction battalions. They work all over the world. And there's probably 10 or 12 construction battalions out working in the Atlantic and the Pacific right now as we speak. Well, my first assignment was to a little island in the Indian Ocean called Diego Garcia. But my second assignment was to the Naval Support Force in Antarctica. Now you can imagine Antarctica is a pretty cold and barren place, and we think of it as a place maybe not having a lot of life. But the National Science Foundation sends about 400 scientists down there every summer to do primary research. Now, their summer is our winter. So we flew down there in August. And you get to McMurdo Station, Antarctica, by flying from Los Angeles to Hawaii into Christchurch, New Zealand. And the day we arrived at McMurdo Station, it was -80 and blowing like crazy. Our assignment when we got off the plane was to open up the ice runway at McMurdo Station. Now, imagine with me. It's dark. It's -80. The wind's blowing 50, 60 miles an hour. And myself and my buddy Pat Edwards, we're there. We're supposed to open up McMurdo Station. So, everyone else went back to the main base and they left us out there. Well, we started looking around the control tower because they had a little control tower there. And what we found was an old map showing the location of all the buildings in Old Willie. When the storm finally subsided and it warmed up a little bit, the wind quit blowing, what we found across this snowscape was about 30 little flags, about the size of a dollar bill, and each of them had a number on them, and they were standing on top of a tiny little bamboo pole. What we come to realize that those bamboo poles were actually about 10 feet long, and Old Willie Field was actually 10 feet below the snow because it had all been covered up that year. So Pat and I, we're supposed to open up this station now, right? We're supposed to open up this place because in about 4 weeks, we've got 300 or 400 scientists showing up and about another 1,000 workers. We've got 4 weeks to open this place up. What we had was a D3, a Cat D3, and a box of dynamite. So when we first opened up the first building, I used 4 sticks of dynamite. It was a little too much because when that dynamite went off, and we looked down in the hole, all we saw was debris. So we backed it off a couple sticks, and I ended up just using maybe a stick, 2 sticks, and just got the right combination of dynamite where we could dig out and open up those buildings. It took us about 3 or 4 weeks to open up the buildings. Navy gave us a commendation for that work. Well, the last building we opened up, we finally had it down to a science. We really knew where to place the dynamite, how much digging was required, and we were able to hook onto that last building and pull it out of the snow, and what it was the old carpenter shop. Of course, we saved our building for last, you know. We damaged everyone else's building first, but we saved ours for last, and we pulled it out. It was about a 12 by 18 building, and we put it on skis, and we pulled it around the rest of that year. And the next year when we returned, we used that building again. 10 years later, I went back with a civilian contractor, and when I got off the plane in August, there sat my old carpenter shop hooked up to the same D3. But when I went inside, what I found out was the Navy pilots had turned it into an Antarctic saloon. Here's the moral of that story. As you folks are building your houses, remember, these houses aren't big pins. They're something you just throw away. They're not disposable. Just like we're using the 3 R's of the Building Green philosophy, we reduce, we reuse, we recycle. In the very same way, we're looking at our buildings in that fashion. In other words, where our children are living now, 10 years later, that same room could be a home office. 20 years later, one of our elderly parents could come back and live in that room. So not only are you trying to save on material, but when you actually build your houses, think of every room having a multiple use. Remember my story of the Antarctic saloon.
Sweat and toil, planning and luck. It's a little bit finished and a little bit rough. With a 2-car garage to store all the stuff. Driveway reserved to park the pickup truck. A piece of heaven on earth, where the weary can rest and the kids can play. Where friends drop over on Saturday to build this house into a home like the one on the range. Home like twilight days, a home like where the sun shines bright. Home like where the heart abides.
Now every week, I do a show on KLAY, 1180 AM. I do the Down Home Radio Show every Saturday afternoon. And recently, I did a show called The New American Home. For that show, I had 3 really great interviews. I talked to Duo Dickinson, and Duo is the author of a book called The House You Build. I also spoke with Sarah Suzanka. She wrote the book called Home by Design. You also might recognize Sarah's work. She did the Not So Big House that was very popular 4 or 5 years ago, and she received recognition from Life magazine as its Architect of the Year. I also talked to John Connell from Warren, Vermont. John is a architect, and he's written on the subject called The Inspired House. Now, when I talked to these folks, they gave me 3 great ideas. I'd like to share them with you today. From Duo Dickinson, I learned, don't fight the site. When you're doing new construction or remodel work, don't fight the site. Whatever the existing conditions are at that site, make best use of those conditions. If you fight the site, you're just spending more money. Use the natural shape of the land and where the existing infrastructure comes into the land to its fullest advantage. Duo Dickinson explains that in his book, The Home You Build. It's really a great book. I suggest you take it out from the library and give it a read. He has 12 other ideas, and they're all just very wonderful ideas, great ways to save money. Now, from Sarah Suzanka, what she shared with me was, be visionary. She said this construction business, building, remodeling houses is very, very, very expensive, but you can't lose your vision. She told me about a family who wanted a home library. You know, 12-foot ceilings, rolling ladders, books floor to ceiling. They put a price tag on it, $50,000. The family said, no way. Sarah said, hold on to your vision. We're not done yet. So through the dialogue they had, after a few weeks, they came up with this very novel idea. You know that central hallway corridor that usually just goes to waste because it's just a place where we walk up and down in between rooms, usually bedrooms? She made that central hallway corridor just an extra 2 feet wide, and she lined it with bookshelves. For less than $2,000, everybody's room, as they entered that hallway, had their own personalized bookshelf, and when you walked down it, the thing looked like a hallway library. In fact, it wasn't even a hallway anymore. So, be visionary. Never lose sight of your vision. From John Connell, author of The Inspired House. He made the point that a house is much more than concrete and steel, wood and nails. It's about building relationships. So as you go out to this show today, I mean, this Kitsap Home Garden Show, I've been to all of them. It's a great show. It's one of the best shows I've ever seen. But you want to find people who've done a project like yours. It's very important. And then build a relationship with people you know and trust. Don't have that low bid mentality. It's about relationships, folks.
I go on the range, home like Father Holidays, home like where the sun shines bright, home like where the heart abides.
Now, the thing about us builders, remember that we'll write on anything we can. We'll write on a scrap of wood. We'll write on a piece of plywood. If you call me up on the job site, I'm going to grab my carpenter pencil and I'm going to write on a 2x4. So when you look in the front seat of my pickup truck, when you see all those 2x4 scraps, realize those are all my note cards. You talk to an electrician, he writes on the backside of cardboard because all of his fixtures, everything he uses, comes in cardboard boxes. He's the most cardboard intense subcontractor there is on the job site. If I'm working with a mason, I see him writing on the back of empty cement bags.
What do plumbers write on? I'm sorry, I couldn't help it.
Hey, Jim, you know the 3 things you know to be a plumber?
Yeah, that's right. You know. Something rolls downhill.
Something rolls downhill.
Payday's on Friday.
And don't bite your fingernails.
That's right.
Mr. Jim Hinde, isn't he great? The best. Emmy Award-winning Jim Hinde. So when you go out there today, give and get. Multiple ways to get in contact with everyone. What I suggest is cell phones, slug mail, websites, personal addresses. Give and get. Not just give them your information, because, you know, they all have these little forms you fill out. Make sure you get their information, too, and follow up. Build relationships with people who've done a job like yours.
And the house stands strong through thick and thin, where the big bad wolf will never get in. We can cuddle up close when the lights grow dim, fearless, never going home again. And the walls will talk of how we cool our jets, warmed our bones, ran around naked when the kids were gone.
really great talking to you today. Keep in mind the points I've made. I suggest that you use components with old world craftsmanship. Remember the 3 R's of the Building Green philosophy: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Think of your rooms as having multiple purposes. These are not throwaway items. Each room has a multiple purpose. Think about the life cycle of the house. It's going to be on the planet for another 200 or 300 years, folks. And finally, give and get multiple ways to keep in contact with everyone. Work with people who've done a job like yours before. Before I go, I'd ask you not to forget about the men and women who are working overseas right now, folks in the armed forces. I mentioned to you a great organization called Homes for Our Troops. We have men and women coming home by the hundreds and thousands without hands, without arms, without legs and feet, missing eyes, in wheelchairs, on crutches. Homes for Our Troops builds and remodels homes for veterans with handicaps. Please remember these folks. HomesForOurTroops.org. It's been great being here. I appreciate it. I want to thank Jim Hinde for joining me. Isn't he great?
I just play the music in the background. Easiest job I know. You guys have your work cut out for you, though, don't you? I'll tell you what, if I were building a home, I'd stick around after the show and talk to this man. He gets nervous when he's on stage, but one-on-one, he's probably about as down-home a guy as you're ever going to meet. And the walls will talk of how we cooled our jets and warmed our bones. Ran around naked when the kids were gone. The king and his castle and the queen her throne. Be it ever so humble, forever be known. We built this house into a home like the one on the range. A home like fire the holidays. A home like where the sun shines bright. A home like where the heart abides.
Jim Hinde.
Tom Landis.
Thanks, folks.